When you purchase Illuvitars, you should clearly decide the difference between your personal preference and market demand, especially with such a short window for the Genesis version. What is going on, Metaverse? I'm really excited to be back with you today talking about Illuvium again, and not just any part of Illuvium, the most important part, the Illuvials themselves. So today, I'm going to bring to you the first ever, and probably too early, tier list for Illuvials for the purpose of purchasing your Illuvitars. Now, if you're not sure what an Illuvitar is, this is your avatar in game or your profile picture when you log in through the auto battler or going to travel around the open world to capture other Illuvials. This is the image that's going to reflect you in the Illuvium universe forever. So the Illuvitars are going to be dropping at some point soon here. We don't know exactly when, but probably in the next 2-3 weeks or so. And during that time period, you're going to have the option to mint a free version or potentially a paid-for version of the Illuvitars. We know from the gaming industry that cosmetics are an incredibly important part. In fact, over $40 billion a year is spent in the gaming industry on cosmetics across all different genres of games. This equates to about 15% of the gaming profits and revenue worldwide. So what that means for us is that Illuvitars are very likely going to be positioned as both a potential store of value as well as your own personal in-game flex. Many of you I know are interested in potentially purchasing either for short-term profits through flipping, long-term holds for yourself. So we're going to get into some details of what are the best Illuvials that you should be focusing on as you try and get those particular Illuvitar pictures. Looking at this, there's potential for massive gains here. If you go back to Pokemon as an example, the original Charizard cards that came out in the Genesis version are worth about $2,000 right now. That's a huge potential for you if you get a highly in-demand first version of a particular Illuvitar that you save for a longer time period. We don't know how long the sale is going to run, but so far the team has mentioned something roughly like 3 days. And what that means is if you don't mint the Genesis Illuvitars within those first 3 days, the only way you'll ever get those opportunities is through purchasing again on secondary sales market. So this is a wild opportunity. Obviously, everything I'm sharing in here, it's not financial advice. You need to do your own research, and certainly don't just ape in and purchase a bunch of profile pictures because somebody told you to. But there is certainly value in having cosmetics in a gaming ecosystem that's going to have a lot of value over time. When you purchase Illuvitars, you should clearly decide the difference between your personal preference and market demand, especially with such a short window for the Genesis version. So how much are the Illuvitars going to cost? We don't know for sure because we don't have an actual price table out, but we do have some initial proposals from the team that would need to be voted on by the DAO itself. On the screen now, you're going to see what those dollar amounts are. So as we can see on the chart here, everyone is going to have the opportunity to get a free virtual Illuvitar that they can use as their profile picture. Now, in this free option, you only have the chance of getting one of the tier 0 Illuvitars. Now, these are still going to be some amazing graphics, but to be fair, everyone's going to know that they're tier 0. And if you're going to be heavily invested and a serious gamer in the Illuvium ecosystem, you probably are going to be willing to pay a little bit extra to give that particular flex of having a higher tier Illuvitar as your profile picture. So going through the various tier lists, you can see we move from basically 0.05 ETH all the way up to 2.5 ETH for an opportunity to get a particular tier of Illuvitars. Now again, all of this is subject to change. There's a lot of discussion going on in the Discord. If you want to get involved and give your feedback, I'm sure the team would appreciate it, and especially the council members who are going to have to vote on this overall structure for the Illuvitars before it drops. What we can see though is as you move up in the rankings across the different boxes, moving from the bronze all the way up to the diamond level, you have an increased chance of getting a higher tier of Illuvitar in that profile picture. So maybe at a bronze, you only have a 0.4% chance of getting that Ramfire that you're really interested in. But if you move up to a gold, it's going to be 5 times more expensive, but that chance also increases tenfold of getting a tier 5 Illuvitar. You're not going to be able to choose specifically which Illuvitar you get, nor are you going to be able to choose which specific accessories get added on top of it. But you do increase your chances of getting something that's probably going to be more valuable. And so the question is, which of the Illuvitars are going to be more valuable overall? Well, that's where I come in. I've put together a sentiment analysis for you based on community feedback through a variety of sources. So the first thing that I've looked at in the sentiment analysis is which specific Illuvials are being talked about the most in the Discord server. we know based on how much people are talking about them, there's more attention. Now, it could be from a competitive gameplay standpoint, and I'm not considering that at all for this video, just to be very clear. So the tier list that I'm going to show you in a minute is only what are the Illuvials that are most commonly referred to, what are the specific classes and affinities that are preferred by the player base, because there's no in-game competitive value that's going to come from your Illuvitar. It's only that profile picture, which means the specific Illuvials that people like the most are the ones that are going to be the most in demand. And so very simply, I've taken the sentiment analysis, how many people are talking about a particular Illuvial, how many people mention Atlas versus Rake versus Umbre versus Ramfire. I've also taken into account which of the affinities and which of the classes are the favorites from the community. Now this is really important because, as we know, over the lifetime of the game, we're going to see lots of balancing changes. Different characters are going to go into more of a meta composition. Some are going to be more valuable in other aspects of the gaming universe over time. So it does matter to us if someone is a fighter versus a scion type, or people may prefer fire types to air types. And based on that, I've also assigned a weight in this ranking to which specific affinity and class is the Illuvial. So for those that are familiar with tier lists, make sure that you don't confuse the tier of ranking that I'm giving with the specific tier of the Illuvial themselves. We don't have all of the Illuvials out yet either, so I've got 62 Illuvials that we have all the public information on that I've included in this first too early version of the rankings. And we're going to rank each of them from S tier all the way down to D. And so those not familiar, the S tier is the top tier of all the Illuvitars, and then we're going to go through A, B, C, and D in that order. So, with no further ado, let's go ahead and start with our very bottom tier of the Illuvials. So here we have tier D of the Illuvial list, and as you can see, we've got a wide range of mixes across various affinities and classes. A couple that I want to highlight for you. The first is TNT. In my opinion, he's got the coolest name out of all of the Illuvials. That said, he has the challenge of being the second evolution of a particularly popular snail concept that we see. And oftentimes, you're actually going to see a lot of people talk less about the second evolution stage compared to the first or the third. There's a couple reasons for that. I won't get into all of them. This is pretty common if you look at Pokemon as well. And so a lot of times you're going to see tier 2s that are lower because they're just not as cute as the first evolution stage, nor are they as strong from a power standpoint as the third in most cases. Another thing that I would highlight, I don't have this tier, nor any of the others except for the S tier, in specific orders. These are just all together as a group. The overall lowest ranked Illuvitar, based on my analysis though, is actually Octius. So maybe some of you like him. He's kind of got an interesting look. I think he's not as badass, honestly, as the Aphisto Illuvial. That's why he ends up falling to the very bottom of tier D for right now. So that said, none of these are going to be bad Illuvitars to get. I think all of them, as soon as you get out of the tier 1, are going to have value within the market. Certainly people are going to have their favorites, so don't be too disappointed if you get a tier D. But if you're trying to shoot for a specific Illuvitar that's going to have more resale value, I would be looking higher to the next tier. So let's move our way up to the C tier of the Illuvitars. A couple surprises for me are that some of these that are the second evolution of some super popular Illuvitars actually make their way down here. They're not talked about a lot. Two I want to highlight, Sinelf and Archos. Both of these, they're evolution stage 1 and stage 3, highly popular, but you don't see these two nearly as much. A couple other lines that I think were a surprise to me based on how much I perceived people were talking about them. The Riptor lines, the Riptor and Riptorus, not nearly as popular as you would think. I think the Scorpion visual looks pretty interesting, but hasn't really caught on quite as much with the fan base. The Vermilia line, from a competitive standpoint, really like this group of rogues as they're moving to the back line to do attacks. Also not as popular. I think graphically they've done a good job with it, but it's a little bit tough with an Anteater to do a whole lot. And so there's a couple reasons I think these are a little bit lower on. Lastly, we've got Tatopy included in here. One of the things that I did in the sentiment analysis is oftentimes you're going to see in the Discord people referring to specific Illuvials, not necessarily by the Illuvial name, but instead by an acronym, an abbreviation. And so just want you to know I did include things like Snail and distributed that across the Tatopy, TNT line, etc. So that information is included in here in the tier list. Still, Snaily isn't quite as popular as you would think. Moving up to tier B, we're going to see several different lines that are super popular. So from the very first set, we're going to see the Axon-Axodon combination. Obviously, Atlas, not here. He's going to be in a higher tier as the centerpiece of the entire Illuvial collection. We've also got some other interesting Illuvials that show up. So we've got Fern and Blazonite, so the first and third evolution. Blazonite, super strong in the right combinations in the arena right now, in the auto battler. And so I think this is leading to it some. Interesting that these are some of the more popular birds that we see out of all of the Illuvials. From my perspective, I don't think they're the best looking. Sorry to whoever designed them. But I think from a gameplay and mechanic standpoint, they are really popular. And that's why you're going to see them a little bit more commonly in these higher tiers. Also, Dwelleth, Flare, Singe, these are some that are popular in various meta compositions in the arena right now. And Archelion and Adorius, two of the really great support units within the gameplay. And again, some of these are some very popular Illuvials, so anything at this B tier and above, there's going to be demand for. I can definitely confirm that will be the case. There are lots of players that are going to have one of these as their absolute favorite. And really, when you're talking about a profile picture, people are only going to be able to use one. And so whatever's their absolute number one most favorite Illuvial, that's who they're going to be going for the Illuvitar. So anything really on this screen with A, B, and S tier, these are going to be the top choices as you're looking at which Illuvials to try and shoot for. So moving on up to the A tier, I'm going to spend a little bit of time with each one of these and talk about them in a little more detail, because these are now the Illuvials that really there's major demand for. We can see both from a class and affinity standpoint, as well as the specific Illuvitar themselves. These are going to be highlights across the ecosystem. So Caribou, I think one of the absolute cutest Illuvials that exists. Same thing for Adore. Both of these are going to be fan favorites. They're certainly both the first evolution in their line. Therefore, they also have a little bit more visual recognition. On the Mamu, this was actually an interesting one to me. I hadn't thought there was nearly as much discussion about this line as there is. Apparently, people really like the elephant line. And so, as we look at this, the other two in the evolution series were a little bit lower. I think they were both in the C tier. But Mamu himself, he's sitting right up here in the A tier. Additionally, we see a couple of great tanks, Scarabok and Titanor. Both of these two really strong in the arena. You can use them to manage to cover up your rogues that are going to jump to your back line. You can use them. Titanor, he's just an absolute beast. Stands in the front, tanks everything. Some amazing gameplay capabilities. Also first-rate graphics for both of these two. So I think you're going to be very pleased if you get any of these on the top line. As I mentioned, Kuka, he's actually pretty popular. The other two evolutions in the series, not nearly as much so. I think part of it is just the graphics on him. Pretty cool. He's got a good facial expression, and I think a lot of people gravitate towards that. The Ramfire and Ramfy should not be a surprise to anybody who's been playing. I think Ramfire, as we look at this overall tier list, he's going to be, from a number standpoint, the top of the third evolution across any of the tiers, and he almost made the cut to the S tier in the overall results. I think if I was personally just ranking, he would be in an S tier for me. So if you want to think about him right on the border, very close to S tier from where he's sitting in A right now. Scoriox, super popular. This guy is just a cannon sitting in the back line wrecking people. I think he's going to be one of the main Illuvitars that people go for. Certainly if you get one. I also think Scoriox is going to be trying to look for one on secondary sales. So if you want to give him a like or shout as soon as you find one, he'll probably be willing to buy it off of you. Make sure you give it to him at a good price though. Seer, great tank again. He's got a pretty impressive AoE. I think the graphics on that are really good. And as you look at some of the gameplay itself, he's one of my favorites in action. As you actually see him competing in the arena. Umbre, also super popular third evolution, great phantom unit. He's going to be able to jump to the back line and take out a lot of big damage dealers on the opposing team. And then Tiktaalik, he's gotten a little bit of some interesting press. There's a fantastic GIF, if any of you haven't seen it, pretty commonly used in the Discord server, and so I think he's become a bit of a fan favorite there. The GIF is of him laughing. If you haven't seen it, make sure you just go over to the server and check it out. Anyone in this A tier, absolutely top notch. You're not going to have any issues from a resale value standpoint. Probably a lot of your favorites you're going to see in these top tiers as well. In the final review, I actually want to say I was a little bit surprised, and you probably are going to be too, who is the top Illuvial from a community standpoint when you look at the sentiment analysis. It's not who you think. So, with no further ado, Here are, in order, the top 5 Illuvials that people are going to demand when it comes to their Illuvitars. So working from the right side to the left, Alfie is number 5, Archie is number 4, Squiz is number 3, Atlas comes in at number 2, and the number 1 most popular Illuvial is actually Dash. So many of you may be a little surprised by this. I was as well. When you think about it, though, part of this goes back to the fact that Dash, sitting as a rogue, sitting as a fire type, these are the 2 most popular class and affinity combinations. And so as we expect things to evolve over time, super popular Illuvial. He's only likely to get more so because his class and his affinity make him highly in demand. As we see gameplay balances over time, this is likely to change. But this top 5, you can't go wrong with any of them. Starting on the right side, we've got Alfie. He's absolutely one of the most popular. As you see sentiment analysis, he's got several hundred likes and comments about him in the Discord server. Very cool graphics. He's got an amazing ability as well from an arena standpoint. So I think you're going to see him continue to stay up towards the top. Moving on, we've got Archie coming in next. Archie, great support unit as well. I think the graphics for him are amazing. For those that have seen Finding Nemo, I think he gives some recognition to the turtles there. May just be me. You may also see some of that similarity. Based on that, I think the graphics top-notch for him. Part of the reason that he's one of the top Illuvials. Squiz, as we all know, Squiz is Kieran's favorite. I think the concept of seeing Squiz driving around in a like Mario Kart style racing game is one that's absolutely hilarious. Super cute. He's also going to have some really impressive gameplay, I think, when we get him into the arena. Definitely top S tier Illuvial. Atlas, what more can you say about him? He's the face of the franchise. Probably going to be here for the foreseeable future. You couldn't imagine seeing an episode of Pokemon without Pikachu. You can't imagine seeing Illuvial without Atlas. Definitely going to be a highly in-demand character when you look at all the PFPs. And then lastly, Dash, as I said, he is a surprise for me at the number 1 spot. And again, some of this I think is sentiment analysis. When you look at how many people are talking about him in the game, good gameplay. He's got a great affinity in class. I think you're going to see him continue to be very popular. As you look at some of the initial Illuvitar pictures that have come out, he's got some great graphics on these as well, just like all of these Illuvitars do. So as you're thinking about your secondary sales, where's the market going to be right now? Based on what I can tell, these are going to be the top tier of all of the Illuvitar profile pictures currently. That said, this is, as I mentioned, very much a way too early look at it because we don't actually have the Illuvitars out. We don't have secondary sales. I do plan to do an updated version of this. As soon as we have the sales, we'll be looking at the secondary sale volume for each particular type of profile picture. Certainly, there's additional content that's going to be in place because you're going to have a lot of accessories that people may add, and so specific combinations may speak to someone more than another. So it's not always just the base Illuvitar themselves. That said, this should give you a good idea of who you should be shooting for as we move towards the Illuvitar sale. Now, one key note, not all of the Illuvitars are going to be sale only. Some of them are going to be tier 0 and free options that you can get from the very basic loot boxes. So a couple things that I want to add from some of these tier 0s. Again, from a sentiment analysis standpoint, the 3 that I'm going to show on screen next, these are the most popular, I think, of the free tiers that we're going to be seeing. The first one, the Links tier, highly popular. There's a lot of variability here because you've got all the different base classes, all the different base affinity combinations. I do think the Nimble Ember Links is going to be one of, if not maybe the most popular. Part of that, again, is also due to just the graphics here, but when you look at class and affinity type, super common. Next up, Doka. I think he's also got a lot of people talking about him. Great graphics here. I think the standing bird combination is pretty impressive. Lastly, I think Volante is going to be a very popular tier 0 Illuvial. When you look at the ETH Lizards community and the ties in that ETH Lizards has with the Illuvium ecosystem, this makes a lot of sense. So a lot of positive sentiment towards lizards in general. I think this is a great graphical design. Whether they took ETH Lizards as the base idea behind this or not, completely irrelevant. I think it speaks to that ETH Lizards ethos of the degen within the ecosystem of Illuvium. So he's going to be super popular. Personally, I like the nature variant. There's 5 pretty impressive options here though, so definitely can't go wrong with any of these 3 as a tier 0 option. all that said, I want to take just a minute and talk about a couple notes that I found as I was going through the affinity and the class type sentiment analysis. So some of this may be a surprise to you. I'm going to put on the screen a couple charts. So the first thing that I want to highlight is the affinity chart. And this is based purely on affinity types. So the 5 base affinities are going to be more commonly talked about in the channels. This is normal. As you look here, they're going to be in order: fire, water, nature, air, and then earth. So this is where general sentiment is for people within the community about each of the 5s. Moving forward, dust, steam, and poison, and then there's a pretty big drop off to the rest. So these are going to be the most popular affinities currently. The second chart I want to show is the sentiment analysis by class. So here, a little bit of a surprise, we don't have the 5 base classes all at the top. And that's because we start off with Rogue, which is far and away the favorite class that anyone has. I think from an in-game mechanic standpoint, has the most unique mechanics that are involved. That leads to part of it. But on top of that, we're going to see Phantom as the second. And so interesting that we see the Phantom actually slightly ahead of the fighter class itself. Very popular combination. Part of this is, I think, due to that Rake Umbre line. So we got Rogues and Phantoms, fighters. Scions, Empaths, Bulwark are up next. Pretty big drop off after you get past Mystic and Slayer to the rest. And you can see maybe you have a specific favorite class that's a little bit lower on down the list. We're going to see this shift over time, especially when gameplay becomes more competitive and we've got a better sense of the overall balance in the months to come. That said, this should give you a general sentiment of where people are feeling right now within the gameplay from a mechanic standpoint. And so keep in mind, a specific Illuvial right now that's of a more favorite class or affinity is likely to grow in popularity as people become more familiar with them, begin using them more in the arena, capturing them in the overworld. And the coolest part about this, we have less than half of all of the Illuvials that we can expect in this very first launch that I've included in the sentiment analysis here. So overall, really looking forward to see the rest. Some we're only going to be able to discover after the overworld launches, which I think is super cool. So again, we'll have some more tier lists coming out in the future. Wanted to give you something to think about as you start looking at the Illuvitar sales that's coming up. So I want to wish each one of you the absolute best of luck in the upcoming Illuvitar sale, whether you're just going for a tier 0 free-to-play option, or you're going to be dropping 15, 20, 100 ETH, who knows, trying to get a specific tier 5. I hope it works out for you. You get a great combination of accessories and the Illuvitar themselves. I would ask each of you in the comments below, share what is your favorite Illuvitar, right? We can certainly get some sentiment analysis here. The Illuvitars themselves, the photos are a little bit different than the Illuvials, so certainly you may have a different preference than what you see from an Illuvitar to an Illuvial standpoint. Share all that in the comments. If you enjoyed the content here, give me a like, give me a subscribe. I'm going to continue putting out more Illuvium focused content. And now you know what Annie knows about the 2 early Illuvitar tier list.